into the sky of stars and caught the red-hot light of the North Star.
Greetings, and as always, welcome back. So, in a tense meeting, American President Donald Trump told Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to concede land and meet Putin's demands. And as a result, Zelensky's now rallying the support, or trying to, of his European partners after this incredibly bruising meeting with Trump, in which he was told to make concessions to end the war or risk facing destruction at the hands of Russia. What does all of this mean going forward? Let's connect some dots and find out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. With each show, my guests and I provide insight and analysis into current events and the broader historical context in which most of these events take place. Let's quickly look at a couple of today's headlines. Trump can send troops to Portland, according to an appeals court. The federal appeals court yesterday said Trump could deploy the National Guard to Portland, Oregon, blocking a judge's ruling from a lower court that prohibited his administration from sending troops into the city. The decision from a divided three-judge panel with a 2-1 split from the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit now authorizes his efforts to place the military in Oregon's largest city, one of several places where he sent troops or vowed to do so, including Los Angeles, Chicago, and D.C. But folks, don't panic yet. This ridiculous decision will be appealed before the entire Ninth Circuit. They'll hear this, what's called en banc, or the entire bench. I can't believe that all of the justices on the circuit, all of the judges on the circuit are this silly. Gaza health minister says at least 80 Palestinians have been killed by the IDF since ceasefire went into effect. They said this yesterday, that Israeli forces have killed at least 90 Palestinians and wounded 303 other people since the 11th of October, the day after the so-called ceasefire went into effect. They said the total of 45 bodies of Palestinians killed by Israeli attacks were brought to hospitals over the previous 24-hour period. I've always asked, how can you negotiate with someone who is sworn to eliminate/exterminate the entire population? I don't understand how you can negotiate with those folks. Finally, Trump ends aid to Colombia after President Petro accuses the United States of murder over these boat strikes. Petro said a U.S. strike on a boat last month killed a Colombian fisherman who had, quote, no ties to the drug trade, end quote. Petro said that a U.S. strike on a boat in September killed a Colombian fisherman. Quote, U.S. government officials have committed a murder and violated our sovereignty in territorial waters. The fisherman, Alejandro Carranza, had no ties to the drug trade, and his daily activities was fishing. And I believe it's very important to repeat the name of Alejandro Carranza, because he, along with those others, have been extrajudicially murdered by the United States. On today's episode, the issue before us is there an established policy for the Trump administration as it relates to the U.S.-initiated military intervention in Ukraine? In a tense meeting, Trump told Zelensky to concede land, meet Putin's demands. Following the trip to Washington, Zelensky has set up a series of calls and meetings with his European backers. What does all of this mean going forward? Let's talk with my guest for some clarity. He's a documentarian who lives in Crimea. He's an American citizen living in Crimea. Regis Tremblay, as always, welcome back.
Well, thank you, Wilmer. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
And let's start this off by telling folks where can they see and how do they access your show?
Several places. Regis.Tremblay at substack.com, on BitChute at TremRegi, TREMREGI, the same thing on Rumble, and on YouTube as Alfredo.Balduc, BOLDUC. So that's where all of my shows and videos are published. Thank you.
Oh, man, thank you. I greatly. And folks, you need to watch Regis as often as you can. So Zelensky is trying to rally support for his European partners after this second whipping that he took at the White House at the hands of Donald Trump, in which he was told to make concessions to end the war or risk facing destruction at the hands of Russia. How is this playing out, and how is this being reported in the region, Regis Tremblay?
Well, it certainly is an embarrassment for Zelensky and all of his European cohorts. But let me talk about that meeting a little bit more.
Please.
This visit to the United States, I don't think anything like this has ever happened before. First of all, he was not even welcomed at the airport by anybody from the White House. The meeting took place on Friday afternoon. These guys are all wanting to go home. The weekend is here. And it happened really very abruptly and quickly. And it's been reported, and even here, that Trump was very angry. He told him everything that you just articulated about he's lost the war, he needs to give up territory, and he needs to understand just exactly where he's at. Now, to make matters worse, he was ushered out of the White House without a handshake, and he was forced to do a press conference across the street from the White House behind barriers and in a park. Now, if that isn't the consummate insult, if that isn't clear to Zelensky, he is now a persona non grata. Some questions are arising here from a number of sources. Does this mean it's the end of Zelensky? Is this a message that Trump has given him? He's no longer useful and helpful. That's one of the first things that I wanted to mention. But Wilmer, I think it's important to go back to Thursday, October 16th, the day before Zelensky flew to Washington and met with Trump. Putin and Trump had an over 2-hour lengthy conversation, the longest they've ever had. And I can almost assure you that this is what Putin said to Trump. Number one, he said, don't even think about sending tomahawks that are capable of being armed with a nuclear weapon to Ukraine, or else. I think he made it very clear, and I wouldn't be surprised if he told him in very uncertain terms, if you do this, you now, the United States, and you, Trump, own this war. I can't believe Putin would have made that any clearer. The other thing that I'm absolutely certain of is that Putin reminded Trump, well, for the second time since Alaska, that's for sure, of Russia's security guarantees. They remain unchanged. If peace comes, it will be based on respect for Russia's strategic security. And then I think he finally told him, we're not going to go for another ceasefire trick.
Mm-hmm.
And imagine what Trump must have been thinking of from Thursday afternoon. What did he think about when he went to bed and when he got up in the morning before he met Zelensky? Wilmer, I have to think that Putin's strong message to Trump resulted in that meeting and that change of the narrative and of the change of the United States, Trump's position towards the war in Ukraine. It changed the way he treated Zelensky before as a son, put his arm around him. They were all smiling, shook hands for the portraits, to the way he brutally pummeled Zelensky before, during, and after the meeting. I don't know what your thoughts are, Wilmer, but I think this was an incredible statement to Zelensky, to his regime in Ukraine, and to all of the European Union who are in support of increasing military aid to Ukraine. Now it's not going to happen.
Well, my next question, before you just so clearly answered it, was, or my next statement before you clearly addressed it, was the abrupt, and using your word, the abrupt nature of the scheduling of this meeting said to me that something significant had changed right before the meeting was called. I go back to Medvedev's message, I think it was last week, when the whole discussion about tomahawks first surfaced. And Medvedev was very clear in saying two things. One, if the United States introduces Tomahawk missiles into the region, that will be, my word, I don't think he used the word red line, he may have, but that'll be a red line that will, I think he said something to the effect of, it will be incredibly perilous for the United States. And then he went on and said, and for you personally, Donald Trump. I think in that conversation that took place between Trump and Putin, I think Putin reiterated that message. Donald, I'm gunning for you. The other thing is,
Wilmer, if I can just comment quickly, I'm not going to repeat it. I've been saying for the last 2 or 3 years that when Putin speaks, he's speaking out of one channel, the consummate diplomat, cautious, thinking like a lawyer. When Medvedev speaks, he's like the right-hand channel. And he is not a loose cannon. I can guarantee you that. So he is so part of the inner circle in the Kremlin that those two messages, Medvedev's message and Putin's message to Trump certainly made it very clear to Donald what was at stake.
Well, in fact, I said to my students just yesterday, I said, kids, you got to understand, Russia doesn't bluff and Russia doesn't play. So, in fact, I made that comment in relation to the silly, just juvenile post that Donald Trump put on social media with him in the jet and all that kind of stupid. I said, I don't see President Xi Jinping doing silly antics like this. I don't see Wang Yi doing silly antics like this. I don't see President Putin or Medvedev doing, or Medvedev, I'm getting my accents wrong. But anyway, you know what I'm talking about. I said, they're too busy handling business to be engaged in social media cartoons. So the other thing is, This also takes me back to the quote that is attributed to Kissinger. It is dangerous to be an American ally. I'm sorry, it is dangerous to be an American enemy, deadly to be an American ally. So I think the world is done with Zelensky, and he needs to be looking for a retirement home.
That, of
or
course,
maybe a retirement bunker.
If he's smart and he has time, he'll flee the country and find some kind of cover in Switzerland or in Florida at one of his mansions somewhere. But I think most people feel that he's finished now. That what happened to him in the White House on Friday it couldn't be clearer. He is no longer useful to Donald Trump and to the United States. End of discussion.
So
now,
wait a minute. So let me ask you a question there. So because we're looking at American foreign policy, we're not so much looking at administration policy. Does this mean that the United States tries to carry on this conflict with another leader or without one, or are we seeing the beginning of the end?
I'll answer that this way, Wilmer. I do not believe that what happened Friday will change American foreign policy vis-a-vis Russia at all.
Okay.
It has been the stated foreign policy goal to inflict a strategic defeat on Russia and to bring about regime change. In other words, get rid of Putin.
Right.
And I don't believe anything will change. Now, that leads me to the other part of the phone conversation that we haven't mentioned yet, which was out of that came a proposed summit in Budapest, Hungary. Supposedly, Trump offered that. Who knows, really? But nevertheless, I will say a couple of things about that. Just like Alaska, people should not expect anything to change. And Wilmer, if it happens. Now, why do I say if? It's because the deputy foreign minister under Lavrov, Sergei Ryabov, he said no meeting had been agreed to yet. No agreement had been made. And then Lavrov talks with Rubio to maybe set the stage for such a meeting. Who knows if that's really what it was about? Or did he also reinforce to Rubio Putin's demands that he made to Trump on Thursday, the 19th? Now, here's how people are looking at what happened surrounding this possible meeting in Budapest. It's a huge embarrassment for the EU, who have been excluded repeatedly by Trump from any participation in the quote-unquote peace talks. They weren't invited to Alaska, and they weren't and won't be invited to Brussels. Now, what does this mean for Trump? Now, this is my own opinion, but I think Trump has really backed himself into a corner with this sudden flip-flop, 180 degrees from demonizing Putin, calling Putin a bad actor, calling Putin not faithful, and from glorifying Kiev and Zelensky. And so he has to answer to somebody about this flip-flop. And I'm thinking that Putin accepting the possibility of a meeting in Hungary is Putin offering Trump a face-saving gesture. That at least now we're continuing to talk about peace. And Donald, you know what? Your aspirations for that prize can still be kept alive because we're continuing to talk about peace. Now, what I think really might happen as a result of this meeting, and this is being reported here in several Russian media, the good thing is that at least they will continue talking and meeting face to face and hoping to maybe improve relations on a variety of different levels, which really have almost all come to a halt. So I think for Trump, he has a chance to save face from what happened on October 19th, but also from the embarrassing meeting that really didn't go the way he wanted in Alaska. He walked out of that meeting, which was supposed to be 3 hours long, and he walked out a little after an hour, and he abruptly skipped the lunch. And the lunch was supposed to be a working meeting between Trump and Putin and delegations from both sides from different ministries. And skipping that lunch and then having to leave and fake that this meeting was really great and successful when now the whole world knows it was a flop, a colossal flop, and a PR win for Russia and President Putin. So I think if Putin agrees to this meeting, and at least he's keeping the talk about it alive, it's a face-saving opportunity for Donald Trump to recoup what he lost in Alaska and to recover from that horrible change of direction at that meeting on Friday with Zelensky. Those are the thoughts, my thoughts, and I think the thoughts of some people over here on this side of the Atlantic.
I think your thoughts are incredibly insightful. And when you said that Trump has to answer for the comments that he's made about Putin, that immediate, and folks know I always turn to The Godfather. That takes me to the scene in The Godfather when they're all sitting in the dining room having dinner, and Michael Corleone turns to Carlo and says, "Somebody has to answer for Santino, Carlo. You have to answer for Santino." And then they, of course, throw him in the pit. Budapest, to me, is an interesting location because if, in fact, a meeting, even the suggestion of a meeting in Budapest, to me, is interesting because Budapest is a signatory to the Rome Statute of the ICC. So, on one level, President Putin could be risking arrest if he went to Budapest. But I think people need to understand that Hungary is looking to remove itself from the Rome Statute because I think in terms of Hungarian politics, they are saying that the ratification of the statute did not go through the proper channels within the Hungarian parliament, and Hungary isn't happy that there is an arrest warrant for Netanyahu, as I understand it. So to those that might be asking the question, why would President Putin go to Hungary and risk being arrested? I think that those concerns have been ameliorated.
Well, that's another interesting intrigue, because it's no secret, at least to people over here, that Viktor Orban of Hungary has been very neutral about Ukraine and very outspoken about resuming normal relations with Russia. And he is a persona non grata in the EU now. He's causing a huge crack and a lot of chaos within that very fragile union. Now, I can't believe that Orban didn't call Putin or vice versa and talk about why Hungary might be an ideal place. Because on the one hand, it is very open to dialogue and friendship with Russia. There's no doubt about that, at least on this side. The other thing is that this is a huge embarrassment to the EU. Mm-hmm. And Katja Kallas came out and she was quoted at some newspaper somewhere in the Union of saying she and the Union are extremely disappointed and frustrated that this meeting will happen in an EU NATO country. What a slap in the face if that takes place. Wilmer, sometimes you have to just step back and laugh at this stuff. It's like this couldn't be scripted better by Hollywood.
Well, elaborate on this a little more, if you would, please, because the European elite, whether they be financial or whether they be political, and some may be the same, they, since the Biden administration, I'll just use the Biden administration as a recent historic reference point. If we look at the destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline, if we look at the European countries capitulating to the United States plan to deindustrialize Europe, they've put an awful lot at stake as it relates to the lifestyle of European citizens and implementing these neoliberal policies in order to pay for this remilitarization of Germany, remilitarization of France. I mean, they've gone in with 10 toes down with the United States. And now all of this really winds up seeming to be for naught.
Well, for naught, but worse than that, the actions of the leaders, of unelected leaders of the European Union, their actions have been actually suicidal.
Exactly.
It wasn't America that brought it on. They didn't have to bow down and kiss Donald Trump's shoes as they did, as Katja Kallas did, and the rest of them. They could have said no, because they know what's happening across from Spain and Portugal all the way east, that the economies, with the exception of one or two countries, Slovenia is one of them, are crashing. They're on the verge of not just recession. Some people are saying depression. Germany's economy has gone to hell, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And they have been the strongest economy in Europe. And you mentioned Nord Stream pipeline. Those countries don't even want an independent study, including Russia, to find out who really did it. Well, I think who really did it points unequivocally to the United States of America. Sure. Cui bono. Even Trump.
It wasn't Gilligan and the SS Minnow. I mean,
yeah. And Joe Biden said, we know it's there, we can do it, and we will do it. So, a close case. You mentioned the deindustrialization of Europe. I do think that is the plan of the United States. They want to remain number one, obviously, in that alliance. They are, and they always have been. But this is the problem that hardly anybody's talking about, Wilmer. That goes hand in hand with the deindustrialization of what's been happening in the United States of America since Clinton and NAFTA.
Sure.
They willingly sent those jobs to Mexico, to China, to Vietnam, to the Philippines, wherever they sent them. And what this did resulted in two really critical things. America cannot compete manufacturing-wise anymore, industrially. It's lost it. The other part of this problem is that millions of highly skilled workers, technical and operational, are no longer in the workforce. There's nobody that's followed behind even to take their places. So America is really in really deep trouble vis-a-vis China, for example, which has become the manufacturing colossus on the planet to this day. Mm-hmm. It's no longer a real competition. But this has been a fatal blow that United States foreign policy and domestic policy has inflicted upon itself and its allies in Europe. Once a tremendously powerful alliance, now, for what it's worth, can be seen crumbling. And Wilmer, I have to tell you, I think you'll agree, China and Russia and India have all been watching this and understand exactly what I've just outlined is happening.
And as a data point, the show is connecting the dots. And so one dot that I think is important for us to connect here, as you talked about the deindustrialization and you talked about the jobs behind NAFTA going to Mexico and going to China. And now one of the fears is we could be losing access. Well, two things. One, we could be losing access to many of those Chinese lower level manufacturing jobs. Also, it's important to realize that the Chinese economy is developing beyond China's need for those lower level manufacturing jobs. That's why the focus, one of the reasons why the focus is now on Haiti, because the United States sees Haiti, the workforce in Haiti, as being the next Chinese low-level sweatshop operation. I just wanted to throw that in there.
Wilmer, even if they could find skilled labor just to retool the manufacturing part of it, mm-hmm. the equipment, which is outdated, it's old, it's rusted, whatever. Even if they could do that, it'll take 10, 15, 20 years, maybe longer, not to catch up with China, just to try to get some manufacturing back. In the meantime, Russia, China, and India, they've gone to the moon.
But my point is, one of the things that I think people need to realize is that as economies develop, they develop out of certain types of manufacturing. It no longer, there was a time when all the little gadgets and all the little trinkets were manufactured in China. China has developed beyond Japan. It was that way before in the 60s. Japan was that way. The one thing you did not want in the 60s was something that said made in China. I'm sorry, made in Japan. And Japan developed its economy beyond the need for those lower skilled, lower level manufacturing jobs. Those jobs went to Mexico. Those jobs went to China. Now China has developed. And so the world is looking for the next spot. And one of those cheap labor, low labor manufacturing spaces would be Haiti. Well, I want to hit quickly, and if you want to comment on that.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's one of the dots we have to connect is what President Xi did and said to Donald Trump a couple of weeks ago. He said, no, you're not going to get any more rare earth minerals, which are needed, critically needed elements for your military industrial complex, for Silicon Valley and all of your high-tech stuff. You can't do it without this. Xi also put a ban on the manufacturing equipment to process this. And in my opinion, this was a death knell to the United States, whatever's left of its military industrial complex manufacturing. I don't know where they're going to get enough of those resources from somewhere else. But how many more jobs are going to be lost? How much more money is going to be wasted by the United States? This was a powerful no that Xi, really, it was like a punch to the gut of Donald Trump. Now, here's the contrast, Wilmer. Russia has never done that, a punch to the gut, to the United States. And it could, because the United States still gets uranium, still gets fertilizers, still gets some rare earth material.
Aluminum as well, I think.
Aluminum from China and Russia. And Russia has not done that. Now, think about this. President Xi has been watching what the United States has been doing to Russia militarily, with sanctions, which they've militarized, with the dollar, which they've militarized. He can see it coming because the United States has already formally declared that China is our new enemy. And I think he saw that and he goes, we're not going down that road that Russia did. Incredible. When you think about trying to connect these dots, I mean, your head has got to start spinning. For most people, it's too overwhelming, Wilmer.
And to that point, I think people need to understand Zbigniew Brzezinski, who was Jimmy Carter's national security advisor, and from what I can discern, was one of those who really set out the United States anti-Russia policy. Margaret, what's her name? The former Secretary of State was one of his acolytes. What's the woman's name?
Albright, Madeleine Albright.
Madeleine Albright, thank you. Madeleine Albright was one of Brzezinski's acolytes. Hillary Clinton was a Madeleine Albright acolyte. That the mindset of Brzezinski has been very, very, very instrumental in the formulation and the adherence to this anti-Russia foreign policy, and that there are those in the foreign policy establishment. Some believe you got to kill China, and to kill China, you kill Russia first. And there are those who believe you got to kill Russia, the Brzezinski crew, you got to kill Russia. And in order to kill Russia, you got to kill China. So your thoughts?
Well, I agree. And I think it's been a really failed policy. I made one of my documentaries.
Wait a minute. Really failed policy because China and Russia have said, if we get together, nobody's killing either of us.
Well, and that's exactly what happened. They forced Russia and China together like they've never been before.
Right.
And anybody that's been paying attention to the meetings of Putin in China, Xi in Russia, in Moscow, those declarations that they've put out were not fancy words, but concrete plans for action going ahead. And so it's a horrible failed policy, both politically and domestically, that the United States has been exercising for a long time. I've started to say, one of my documentaries was called, Who Are These Russians and Why Do We Hate Them? Now, I didn't go back 500 years in history. I went back only since the end of World War II, my generation. And ever since that time, it had been the plan of conspirators, or whatever you want to call them, in the UK and the United States to nuke 60 Russian cities or whatever it was. These now have become well known. Since that time, everything that's come out of the mouth of the United States has been to demonize the Soviet Union. Ronald Reagan, remember?
Yes.
The Red Menace, an evil nation, a godless nation. And from there on, all of the narrative has been about demonizing the Soviet Union. And from the year 2000, when Putin became president, it has been to demonize Russia, and specifically public enemy number one in the eyes of the United States, Vladimir Putin. Total insanity. In fact, it borders on satanic.
This question popped in my head. Zelensky says we need Tomahawk cruise missiles. We need Tomahawk cruise missiles. Comes to the United States. A whole lot of folks thought that Donald Trump would make the huge mistake and provide those missiles. Do you have any insight into, do we even have Tomahawk missiles to give him?
Well, that's a good point. I did a show the other night, and one of my guests pointed out that maybe there are 1,700 Tomahawk missiles in the United States arsenal and maybe in some other countries.
Okay.
Many of those are 25 years old and probably no longer reliable.
Okay.
Who knows what the current number really is, but it has been stated very clearly by supposed authorities in the United States that the United States cannot afford to give up what it has to anybody, much less Ukraine, and they can only manufacture a very limited number. It's like, I think I heard something like under 1,000 a year, whoever it is, Raytheon doing it, on top of everything else Raytheon is producing. So Russia knows all of this.
Mm-hmm.
Russia knows that even a handful of Tomahawks stationed in Ukraine, the flight time to Moscow, probably less than 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
How does Russia know if that launch is equipped with a nuclear warhead? And Wilmer, back to the topic from the very beginning of the show, I am sure that Putin made this very clear to Donald Trump, that this would be an escalation, not in the war in Ukraine. It won't change anything in Ukraine, but what if Putin and the people around him in the military think that it's a nuke? They will immediately respond by accident, a mistake, a misdiagnosis, a misreading, and then the rest of us are poof.
To that point, again, the show is called Connecting the Dots. A couple of months ago, maybe you would know better, 5 or 6 months ago, Russia changed its nuclear response strategy. And they made the point, I will paraphrase, you can put the finer points on it if you would, please. But the simple point is, any weapon provided, any weapon used by a non-nuclear country, provided by a nuclear country, will be determined by Russia to be a nuclear attack by the providing country. That was 6 months ago, 4 months ago, whatever it was. So what we've seen here is a very calculated, very determined, very deliberate move by Russia to position itself for what I believe it saw coming. And I think that reality made its way into the telephone conversation, not only the conversation between Putin and Trump, but the conversation between Lavrov and Rubio. And I don't think that Rubio and Lavrov had a discussion. I think Rubio had to listen to a diatribe from Lavrov. And Lavrov basically said, don't make me kick your ass.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to sit across the table from Sergei Lavrov for any money in the world. Across the table, I'd love to meet the guy someday. But
I'd love to have dinner with him, but I don't want to have a debate with the man.
As far as Russia's nuclear,
but is that scenario accurate?
It's pretty close.
Okay.
Russia has consistently disavowed any first strike attack,
correct,
nuclear attack on anybody.
Correct.
However, Russia has said if it even feels immediately threatened by such an attack, it will respond immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And that was not a too subtle change in Russia's position. Basically, that's where we're at. I think maybe this was a wake-up call for Donald Trump, maybe Rubio, but I think there have to be some real hard-liners in the White House and like Lindsey Graham in the Senate, who are putting all kinds of pressure on Trump. And that's why I think that maybe this meeting in Budapest, if it happens, can be a face-saving favor from Putin to Donald Trump, so he doesn't have to face the ugly music that he's totally giving up.
You know, that's an incredibly interesting and insightful statement by you, because I think you would remember it wasn't long ago that so-called Western analysts were asking the question, how does the United States give Putin an off-ramp? How does the United States enable Putin to save face? That's been a couple of the questions that has been asked on a number of shows periodically, as though the United States has the upper hand here. Well, you and I have known since this thing started that no, it's been a losing effort from the first shot being fired. So you're saying that Putin is offering Trump the out is I believe, an incredibly insightful analysis.
Well, and let us recall this, Wilmer. It was during the Obama regime when Syria was accused of having biological weapons.
Yes.
And Putin said privately to Obama, look, I'll help you out. We can get those weapons out of there. We'll put them on a ship and we'll destroy them all. And Obama, again, it was a tremendous favor from Putin, but he had to save face because now that problem of biological weapons had gone away. So Putin, he's a master diplomat. He's a former KGB analyst who has lived in East Germany and has worked with, from that time on, those kind of players from other countries. I think there's nobody smarter than Putin anywhere in the world. And to have a sidekick like Sergei Lavrov, you talk about a two-headed monster. I mean, it's a 1-2 punch.
And I not that I have to say this, but I think it is important relative to how people view this analysis. And folks, this is analysis. Because there are those who would hear this and say, oh, well, you guys are just Putin bots and Regis lives in Crimea. But folks, I've never met Vladimir Putin. I don't know the man from Buddha House Cat. And I know Buddha House Cat. This is just analysis of the facts. And if the analysis of the facts look, 1 + 1 = 2. Whether you like 2 or hate the number 2, 1 + 1 = 2. It always has, it always will. So I could say 1 + 1 = 4 because I don't like 2, but I'd be wrong. So I
agree. And there's a difference between analysis and predicting. Predicting is like, this is what's going to happen. You and I haven't done that. We have just tried to look at the topics we've talked about today to see if we can analyze and discover various dots that are connected. And this is...
And what do those dots tell us?
Well, that's in it. Now, the problem is, and you know this, and you've probably done shows, is that the brainwashing of 99% of the American people has been so thorough for generations, you can't even bring up Russia or Putin or the Nord Stream or anything about Russia without people turning you off, or in many of our cases, and mine especially, you lose friends, you lose longtime colleagues, and you lose family.
And you lose
jobs.
jobs.
And people lose jobs. Exactly.
I lost a job behind this.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to be the chair of the political science department at my alma mater, Hampton University. And they pulled my contract once I was seen on a PBS show explaining this history. They said, "Nah, we can't have you down here talking this."
Yeah.
So to your point you made a little earlier about Putin being a brilliant man. I've said earlier in this show, and I've said many times, Russia doesn't play, Russia doesn't bluff. Another thing that I think is very important to understand here is that President Putin has been nothing but consistent in his demands from day one, which says to me, when we get to this point of the conversation, when he called Trump on Thursday and said, "Let me tell you what's about to happen to you," now he's basically trying to negotiate the sleeves off of his vest, because his positions have been consistent from day one. The things that he's saying to Donald Trump are the same things he said to Joe Biden and are the same things he said to Barack Obama.
Well, good point. I want to say this. I have never tried to canonize Vladimir Putin. I am not alone, and there are many people here in Russia who recognize that he has some faults, some weaknesses, but who doesn't? And the one thing that I will say that arguably, well, you can't really argue about it, is on the global stage, Putin has done two things. He's put Russia's interests first, I think, for the most part. And second of all, as a diplomat, as a leader, he has no equal, not even President Z. So one thing,
really,
even his enemies.
Wow.
Well, you don't hear President Z out there promoting very often, nor nearly as often as Putin, the whole BRICS and the development of BRICS. You don't hear Z talking as often as Putin does about developing new partnerships, new relationships. Putin agrees. I mean, Z agrees to all of that, but there's no one other than Putin who's been the band leader.
Okay. I won't debate you on that. Okay.
Yeah. And so I think as a leader, even his enemies who may hate him, and all these people in the United States that might hate him, when you look at what he's done, you can call it evil, but he's been a damn good leader of evil.
And let me say to folks, the one thing no one has ever heard me discuss, except on a very, very superficial level, are Russian domestic politics. Because I don't know anything about Russian domestic politics. I know foreign policy, but in terms of what's going on inside Russia from the domestic perspective, you won't hear me comment on that because I don't know nothing about it.
I will if you give me a couple of minutes.
But my point is, I stay in my lane, and when I need that insight, I turn to people like you. So, Regis Tremblay, the floor is yours.
I appreciate that, because I am one of the only. I'm a tiny influencer, but I'm the only one, if not the only one, living in Russia, who's been coming here since 2016, again in 2018 and 2019, and now living here for almost 6 years. This is what I would like to tell your audience. What I can tell you, seen with my own eyes, is what happened since the fall of the Soviet Union and the emergence of Vladimir Putin in 2000, the year 2000, has been a miracle, has been a classic example of the phoenix rising from the ashes. Now, he didn't do it alone. He had a lot of support. Okay, there's no doubt about it. But he has been the leader for all of those, except for like one term when Medvedev was president and Putin was prime minister. He was really in charge, there's no doubt. I have seen my own eyes, the incredible increase in the quality of living, in wages. I have free health care, for crying out loud. I now have permanent residency. In terms of the way Russia has recovered from 2,000 plus sanctions, in terms of agriculture, in terms of high technology, in terms of manufacturing, anywhere you want to look, under his leadership, Russia today, arguably, is one of the most successful countries in the world and has risen to number 4 in terms of economic size based on GDP, ahead of Japan. Now that's saying something. I want to tell you your listeners and viewers a couple more things, if I may.
Sure.
When the government has been trying to promote an increase in demographics, births, because like many countries, including the United States, it's tipping in the wrong direction. I can tell you this. There isn't a day that I don't go out that I don't see 2 or 3 dozen women with strollers and many with a toddler running beside them. Women who have a baby get 1 year's paid maternity leave. The family gets a small allowance. In terms of having a second or third child, it's an even greater financial allowance.
Wow.
I mean, this is incredible. Now, that's just one example, okay, of some of the wonderful things that are happening here. And people say, and Trump has said, oh, the economy is collapsing, falling apart. You got to be out of your head. We shop in a local outdoor market, very large. All of our stuff comes from local farmers or neighboring countries where things are grown fresh and transported in. We lack nothing. I can go to a grocery store. I can go to a shopping center, and there is absolutely nothing that I can't find here that I could find in the United States of America. And that includes Gillette razor blades. Now, the grocery stores, I'll give you an example. Just yesterday, I was in the local grocery store. For here, it's kind of a big place, but every time I go there, and yesterday especially, I couldn't get down certain aisles because they were being restocked. There's no empty shelves ever. And you know, I have to take this circuitous route to get around to where I want to go, because this is a scenario that you see in several aisles in the grocery store. And so nobody's going hungry here. Well, there are people, I think, who are having a tough time, especially people on pensions, because their pensions are not high enough. They should be better and higher. But, you know, by and large, the majority of Russians are doing very well. And so that is a complete fallacy. Do I look like I'm emaciated? Do I look like I'm not being fed properly? I'm trying to lose about 20 pounds, for crying out loud. That's what the local economy and the local cuisine have done to me.
And who's I draw blanks on these names. Who's the American conservative broadcaster, podcaster that went about a year or so ago and had the meeting with Lavrov? Had a meeting with Putin from the United States, ultra conservative guy, Tucker Carlson. And Tucker Carlson said exactly the same thing that you've just said. He said, I was expecting when my crew and I got here that we wouldn't be able to find anything. He says, we went to the store, and not only did we find what we needed and more than what we wanted, we didn't pay nearly as much for it as we thought we were going to have to pay.
You know, I don't agree with Tucker on everything. But he's certainly changed his tune about Russia
Absolutely.
and what's happening in Ukraine. I think he still believes that Putin was wrong for invading.
Mhm.
But the one thing I have to say about him is I think he's ended up changing a lot of his views that he had held previous to leaving Fox, and now beginning to discover there's another side to every one of those issues that he's been dealing with for most of his life. That's kind of encouraging. And I think, he's been I don't know if there's been a more powerful voice in America speaking out not only against American foreign policy to Russia, but against American foreign policy to Israel. I mean, I hope he's got a lot of protection, because the kind of things that he's saying supposedly got what Charlie Kirk got. He got eliminated.
Right.
And so I don't know. I'm just really pleased to see he's changed his views on a number of things. I think he still tends to believe that countries like Russia and China are more like enemies. And that's unfortunate.
Well, Regis, I greatly appreciate you joining me today. And I'll just make this quick point. You mentioned Charlie Kirk. Folks, it's amazing to me how quickly that story, the reality of that story went away.
Has disappeared.
Disappeared because they say he was shot with a 30-06 round. And a 30-06 round travels around 2,700 feet per second. And if you got shot in the neck, soft tissue, if you got shot in the neck with a 30-06 round from 200 yards away, first of all, you'd have to be a phenomenal marksman to hit your target from that distance, especially when you throw in a 5 to 7 mile an hour wind. And it would not have left a hole in his neck. I don't mean to be gruesome here. It would have blown his head off.
Hit his head off.
And you can check with any ballistics expert, which I am not, but I know enough about this to be able to say, if you get hit in the neck by a 30-06 round, 2,700 feet per second, there would not have been a head left on that man. So just wanted to make that point since you mentioned Charlie Kirk.
Yeah, there's so many unanswered questions and so many just really stupid things that the government has done and said that, and again, we're probably never going to find out what really happened.
No, we're not. With that, Regis Tremblay, man, you were very flexible with me today. Thank you so much. Greatly, greatly, greatly appreciate it. I believe every conversation I have with you, I think, is our best conversation. And so this one, I think, is.
I was just thinking the same thing. I hope you'll send me the link so I can post it again on my channels.
Oh, you will get it. You will get it immediately, if not sooner. Thank you so much, man. And enjoy the remainder of your day.
Thank you, my friend. We'll see you again.
Thanks, Regis. All right, folks, I got to thank Regis for joining me today. Thank you all so much for watching and listening to the Connecting the Dots podcast with me, Dr. Wilmer Leon. New episode tomorrow. Scott Ritter is going to join us tomorrow. And one of the questions I'm going to ask Scott early on in the conversation is, do we actually have Tomahawk cruise missiles to send to Ukraine? Or is this just another one of those, yeah, we'll agree to send them to you. You'll get them in 2 years. Please follow, subscribe. Let me tell you something, folks. Honestly, no matter what you think about the politics, you cannot debate the incredible analysis that Regis Tremblay just provided. You will not get that anywhere else except here and on his show. And I think it was Malcolm X that told us, if my telling you the truth makes you angry, don't get angry at me. Get angry at the truth. Follow us on social media. You can find all the links below in the show description. And remember, this is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge, because talk without analysis is just chatter, and we don't chatter here on Connecting the Dots. See y'all tomorrow. Scott Ritter's going to join us. Until then, I am Dr. Wilmer Leon. Peace. Have a blessed remainder of your day.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.